Millionaire hides shocking secret that makes immigrant rich long before marriage. Maria wiped her damp palms on her apron as the last rush of dinner crowd spilled out of Joe's diner. The clatter of plates and chatter fading into the humid New York night. The neon sign outside hummed and flickered, casting strange shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Her heart was pounding, not just from the non-stop work, but something else, something she couldn't place. She glanced toward the corner booth where David always sat. He was quiet, separate from the noisy regulars who called the diner home like an old friend. Tonight, though, he looked anxious. His fingers tapped a restless rhythm on the scarred table, eyes flicking toward the door every few seconds. Something about him made Maria's stomach twist, a mix of curiosity and unease. As the last customer slid out, Maria started to clear the tables when her eyes inside, the soft glow of the overhead light hit stacks of thick envelopes, each bulging with crisp $100 bills. Maria's breath hitched. She pulled out a folded letter resting atop the bundles, a letter addressed to her. Her name, handwritten in careful script, made her hands shake harder. The letter spoke of a fortune hidden long ago, secrets tied to her family's name. She swallowed hard, feeling a lump rise in her throat. How could this possibly be true? She pressed the paper tighter against her chest, beats hammering wildly. Was David connected to this? Was his presence in her life as random as she thought? Or had fate pitched this moment just to her? Maria's mind spun fast, a whirlwind of fear, hope, and confusion. Should she keep the money? Return it? What if it meant risking everything she'd built? The fragile life sewn together from sweat and dreams. Her reflection caught in the window showed a woman torn between shadows and light, laughter fading, replaced by a flicker of desperation. Suddenly, the diner's door jingled sharply and she whipped around. David stood there, his usual calm replaced by an intensity, eyes locking onto the open briefcase. "Maria," he said, voice low but steady, "we need to talk." Outside, the city roared on, cars honking, footsteps echoing, yet inside, time stilled. The secret in that briefcase wasn't just cash. It was a key to a past Maria thought was buried. And now that key was swinging wide open. Her heart pounded like a drum, her hands clammy but ready. A rush of questions flooded her. Why him? Why now? What truth was hiding behind that quiet smile? And most terrifying, could she trust the man who might know everything about her family and maybe more? The diner felt suddenly smaller, the walls echoing with unspoken promises and silent warnings. Maria's laugh, once bright and easy, hovered on the edge of disappearing. A new story was beginning, a wild, dangerous dance with truth that threatened to unravel her entire world. What secrets did David really carry? And what price would Maria pay to uncover them? Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube canceled their subscriptions without warning. Just check out the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like. It helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love meeting all the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes a difference. Let's interact. Maria's breath hitched at David's entrance, the tension sharp enough to slice through the thick air. She could see the determination etched in his brow, the way his fingers curled tightly around the edge of the table. Her heart raced, but not just from fear. It was laced with an unholy mixture of excitement and dread. "Maria," he said, stepping closer, "we need to talk." His voice was a gravelly whisper, urgent and taut. "What's going on, David?" she asked, her throat dry. Every instinct screamed for her to escape. The diner felt like a cage, the walls closing in. The briefcase lay open, its secrets spilling into the charged silence. "You have to know the truth about the money." Just then, a loud crash echoed through the diner's front window. Maria spun around, heart pounding like a war drum. A group of masked figures stumbled through the door, one brandishing a gun, another waving a metal pipe. The diner's fluorescent lights flickered, casting erratic shadows, as panic surged among the remaining customers. "Everyone on the ground!" barked one of the intruders, his voice harsh and cracked. Maria's stomach dropped. She felt paralyzed, eyes glued to the gun, glittering coldly in the light. David reacted first, instinctually shielding her from view. "Get behind me," he ordered, a strange calmness layered over his fear. But something in the way he moved, like a coiled spring, gripped her with dread. She could see his jaw tightening, a sudden flicker of determination lighting his eyes. "David, don't!" she whispered urgently, but his focus was shifting. He locked eyes with the intruder, and in that electric moment, something shifted. "Give me the money," the masked man shouted, pointing the gun in David's direction. "Now!" David's hand shot into the briefcase, pulling out the envelopes. Maria gasped, her heart racing for a different reason now. "David, don't!" But he was already stepping toward the gunman, confidence brimming in his stance. "You don't want to do this," he said coolly. "This isn't what you think." The air grew still, the sounds of chaos muffled, replaced by a deafening silence. David's calm pierced through the tension like a knife. That's when it hit Maria like a freight train. He wasn't just a quiet diner goer. Just as it dawned on her, David tossed an envelope to the floor, sending cash fluttering like confetti. "You want the money? Take it." The gunman hesitated, momentarily distracted. And it was in that split second, David lunged forward, the surprise on the man's face morphing into rage. Before she could process, chaos erupted. David tackled the intruder, knocking the weapon from his grasp. A shot rang out. Somewhere in the diner, a scream echoed. Maria flinched, every nerve in her body screaming. "Stay down!" David roared as he struggled with the masked man. But Maria was frozen, her thoughts spiraling. Who was he really? What secrets lay behind his facade? In the turmoil, her eyes met the other masked intruder, who had taken advantage of the distraction. He rushed toward the remaining table, yelling for everyone to stay down. Time slowed. In that moment, she realized something was very wrong. Not just with David, but with everything. Maria clutched the letter tightly, the words now swirling in a storm of questions. The fortune, was it true? Had it tied them both together in ways she could never imagine? Suddenly, the second intruder jerked, his mask slipping. Maria's breath caught. Behind the mask flashed a face she recognized. A chilling recognition unfolded in her mind. It was Carlos, her long-lost brother, the one her family had mourned years ago. The revelation crashed over her like a tidal wave, pulling her down, making it hard to breathe. Had David known all along? Was he tangled in something larger, something dangerous? As the fight continued, and the city outside howled with chaos, Maria was left breathless, caught in a tempest of shocking truths. Where were they headed next? What did family mean now? In the eye of the storm, uncertainty loomed larger than ever, and Maria knew one thing for sure. The world she thought she knew was unraveling, leaving questions that begged for answers. Chaos erupted as David and the masked intruder wrestled on the diner floor. The gun clattered away, and the sound of panic swallowed the room whole. Maria's heart raced, pounding against her ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. She felt paralyzed, trapped between horror and disbelief. Carlos was here, Her brother, the one she thought had been lost forever, the dark ghost of her family's past. "No, stop!" she cried out, despair clawing at her throat. But no one heard her. The struggle escalated, grunts and shouts piercing the air, echoing off the diner's walls. David was strong, but the intruder was wild, desperate. Words blurred into chaos. Then, as everything threatened to spiral into yet another layer of madness, something shifted violently. Carlos's hand shot into his jacket, pulling out a silver object that glimmered under the diner's flickering lights. In an instant, Maria's eyes locked onto it, her vision narrowing to that deadly flash. "Carlos, no!" Her voice came out as a desperate plea, raw and shaking. But as he pressed the silver object into the palm of the other masked man, Maria's world twisted upside down. A glimmer of recognition dawned on her. It wasn't a gun, it was a badge. The insignia gleamed in the light, and her stomach dropped. Police badge. A surge of confusion washed over her. Was Carlos an officer? How could that be? The man she grew up mourning. The one they all believed had died in a tragic accident. Alive and making deals in a diner? Making a mistake, Carlos shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Put the gun down! We can talk! Just put it down!" David froze, all fight leaving him momentarily as the reality of this shocking reveal hit him. The diner felt smaller now, crowded with secrets that threatened to suffocate them. Maria's mind raced. Who was Carlos really? What did this mean for her family? The first masked man hesitated, shock etched across his features as he stared at the badge. You're a cop?" His grip on the arm of the other intruder faltered. Uncertainty crackled in the air, a new wave of tension swelling inside the diner. "Just drop it, man," David said, edging back slightly. The fight dissipated for a heartbeat, replaced by an electric stillness. But then, like a cruel joke from fate, the sound of sirens blared in the distance. Maria's heart sunk. There was no way out now. Everything spiraled. The criminals, the cops. It was all the same messy ball of lies and tangled stories. "Carlos, what have you done?" Maria whispered, not even sure if he could hear her over the rising chaos. What was the truth behind his disappearance all those years ago? The realization struck her like lightning. Had he orchestrated this? Was he part of some deeper plan, drawing her into a web of intrigue she never asked for? The truth felt like glass in her throat, sharp and suffocating. Suddenly, the diner's front door burst open, and uniformed officers flooded in, guns drawn. "Get down! Everyone on the ground!" Chaos reignited. Maria crouched beneath the counter. Trapped in a nightmare. David, Carlos, the intruders, they all tangled together in an intricate dance of secrets threatening to unravel her whole world. She clutched the crumpled letter tight to her chest, heart pounding. The fortune, the secrets, everything that felt like it was beginning to make sense now twisted into confusion again. The ambient noise of sirens and shouting drowned out her thoughts, but one question blared louder than any other. What had Carlos been hiding all this time, and how was it As the officers shouted orders and David stood ready for action, Maria realized she was on the edge of something much larger than a robbery. Secrets flooded her mind. Loss, betrayal, family. And she had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. What was the truth? Who could she trust? And would she be ready for what came next? Chaos erupted as David and the masked intruder wrestled on the diner floor. The sound of shouted commands blended with the clatter of dishes and terrified gasps. Maria crouched beneath the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged animal. Carlos was here. Her brother. The realization sent a cold shiver down her spine. "No! Stop!" She cried again, her voice barely a whisper beneath the cacophony. But no one heard her. Every instinct urged her to run, to escape the nightmare that was unfolding in front of her. David struggled with the masked man, desperation painted across his face. Time hung in suspense, every second feeling like an eternity. Then came the blaring sound of police sirens cutting through the noise. The entrance erupted with uniformed officers yelling orders. Panic surged anew among the diners, faces contorted in horror. As the officers stormed in, their guns raised, Maria felt her pulse quicken. "Get down, everyone, on the ground," an officer barked. Their shouts spiraled into a flurry, adding to the whirlwind of fear enveloping her. But as chaos escalated, one officer moved in closer. His eyes darted around the diner like a hawk spotting prey. Then they landed on Maria, and her breath caught in her throat. "Is anyone hurt?" he called, moving toward her. "Carlos," she managed, voice breaking. You need to stop him." She pointed toward where her brother stood, hands trembling, eyes wild. But before Carlos could speak, before anyone could react, he jerked his head back as if struck. Maria's heart dropped. A cold, shattering realization embedded itself deep within her. Carlos was the one who'd caused all of this. "No!" she screamed, grappling with the sudden weight of betrayal. The man they mourned was not just alive, but had orchestrated this chaos, somehow pulling strings from the shadows. "Maria!" Carlos shouted, desperation slicing through his voice. "You don't understand. But the officer advanced, pulling out a weapon, aimed at Carlos. Everything seemed to slow down. Maria's wide eyes met David's, a silent connection that conveyed disbelief and dread. "Just back away! Drop the badge!" the officer yelled, misunderstanding the urgency in Carlos's eyes. "Don't shoot, please!" Maria cried, her heart now a wild drum in her chest. The din of a scuffle faded into a haunting silence. Before anyone could react, Carlos's expression shifted. He turned, urgency replacing fear. "I'm not the one you think I am!" But in that moment, his words fell on deaf ears. Suddenly, Carlos lunged toward the officer, grabbing the badge from his pocket and thrusting it in their face. "Look!" he shouted, breathless. "I was undercover. This is all a setup." The room held its breath, silence hanging like thick fog. The masked intruder was frozen, confusion etched on his face, and the officers seemed momentarily stunned. Then, from the shadows, another figure emerged. A man in a crisp suit stepped forward, the light catching his sharp features. "Carlos," he said, voice low but powerfully authoritative. "You were supposed to stay hidden." Gasps rippled through the room. Maria's heart raced again, but this time for another reason. This man, he knew Carlos. But how? "Who are you?" she demanded, heart racing. The shock hung heavy in the air, questions clawing at her throat. "Your brother is tangled in a world much larger than you realize," he continued, gesturing dismissively to the scene around them. "He was not just pretending to be dead, he was working for me." The revelation struck Maria like a thunderclap. Her brother wasn't a victim. He was a player in a game she didn't even know existed. Everything in her spun. Trust fracturing, hopes collapsing. The man turned to Carlos. "You've done well, brother. But we need to get out of here." The urgency of the moment crashed over her like a tidal wave, leaving her breathless. What's really going on?" Maria whispered, acutely aware of how far the ground had shifted beneath her. The simple family story had unraveled into shadowy dealings, loyalties tested, and hidden agendas. "Maria, please," Carlos begged. but the weight of betrayal was cemented in her heart. And just as the officer turned to cuff Carlos, the sound of gunfire erupted from the diner window. Glass shattered, and the world outside transformed into a different battlefield. "Get down!" the officer shouted anew as chaos rushed back in. In the din of confusion, Maria felt the walls closing in. She'd thought she was on the brink of uncovering deep family truths. She was now caught in the middle of a shocking web of deception, where nothing was as it seemed. What secrets lay hidden in shadows? Who could she trust? And how could they escape the chaos that had drawn them all into darkness? Chaos erupted as David and the masked intruder wrestled on the diner floor. The sound of shouted commands blended with the clatter of dishes and terrified gasps. Maria crouched beneath the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged animal. Carlos was here, her brother. The realization sent a cold shiver down her spine. "No, stop!" she cried again. Her voice barely a whisper beneath the cacophony. But no one heard her. Every instinct urged her to run, to escape the nightmare that was unfolding in front of her. David struggled with the masked man, desperation painted across his face. Time hung in suspense, every second feeling like an eternity. Then came the blaring sound of police sirens cutting through the noise. The entrance erupted with uniformed officers yelling orders. Panic surged anew among the diners, faces contorted in horror. As the officers stormed in, their guns raised, Maria felt her pulse quicken. "Get down! Everyone on the ground!" an officer barked. Their shouts spiraled into a flurry, adding to the whirlwind of fear enveloping her. But as chaos escalated, one officer moved in closer. His eyes darted around the diner like a hawk spotting prey. Then they landed on Maria, and her breath caught in her throat. "Is anyone hurt?" he called, moving toward her. "Carlos," she managed, voice breaking. You need to stop him." She pointed toward where her brother stood, his hands trembling, eyes wild. But before Carlos could speak, before anyone could react, he jerked his head back as if struck. Maria's heart dropped. A cold, shattering realization embedded itself deep within her. Carlos was the one who'd caused all of this. She screamed, grappling with the sudden weight of betrayal. The man they mourned was not just alive, but had orchestrated this chaos, somehow pulling strings from the shadows. "Maria!" Carlos shouted, desperation slicing through his voice. "You don't understand." But the officer advanced, pulling out a weapon aimed at Carlos. Everything seemed to slow down. Maria's wide eyes met David's, a silent connection that conveyed disbelief and dread. "Just back away. Drop the badge," the officer yelled, misunderstanding the urgency in Carlos's eyes. "Don't shoot, please," Maria cried, her heart now a wild drum in her chest. The din of a scuffle faded into a haunting silence. Before anyone could react, Carlos lunged toward the officer, grabbing the badge from his pocket and thrusting it in their face. "Look, he shouted, breathless. "I was undercover. This is all a setup." The room held its breath, silence hanging like thick fog. The masked intruder was frozen. Confusion etched on his face, and the officer seemed momentarily stunned. Then, from the shadows, another figure emerged. A man in a crisp suit stepped forward, the light catching his sharp features. "Carlos," he said, voice low but powerfully authoritative. "You were supposed to stay hidden." Gasps rippled through the room. Maria's heart raced again, but this time for another reason. This man, he knew Carlos. But how? "Who are you?" she demanded, heart racing. The shock hung heavy in the air, questions clawing at her throat. "Your brother is tangled in a world much larger than you realize," he continued, gesturing dismissively to the scene around them. He was not just pretending to be dead. He was working for me. The revelation struck Maria like a thunderclap. Her brother wasn't a victim. He was a player in a game she didn't even know existed. Everything in her spun, trust fracturing. Hopes collapsing. The man turned to Carlos. "You've done well, brother, but we need to get out of here." The urgency of the moment crashed over her like a tidal wave, leaving her breathless. What's really going on?" Maria whispered, acutely aware of how far the ground had shifted beneath her. The simple family story had unraveled into shadowy dealings, loyalties tested, and hidden agendas. "Maria, please," Carlos begged, but the weight of betrayal was cemented in her heart. Then, suddenly, the power went out. The fluorescent lights blinked out, plunging the diner into darkness. Murmurs of confusion turned to screams, voices echoing in the pitch black. "Stay quiet," an officer barked, but the air was now heavy with panic. With shouts and crashes, a figure rushed toward the table where Carlos stood, the sound of metal clinking against the tiled floor. A solid thud hit her ears, followed by a sharp cry. Then another voice boomed, a deep, commanding tone that silenced everything. "This ends now. You've all been pawns in a game much larger than you ever realized." As the lights flickered back on, Maria gasped. The man in the suit was now standing over the masked intruder, revealing a badge shining bright. He wasn't just a shadow in Carlos's story. He was the mastermind behind it all. "Let's clean this mess up." His eyes glinted, a cruel smile creeping across his face. And in that moment, Maria's world shattered anew. Carlos stumbled back, shock coursing through him, and Maria staggered, realizing the truth. This was never about family. It was a setup, and they were all trapped in a web far beyond their understanding. "Who are you?" she whispered, the question slipping from her lips like a lifeline in the tumult. But the answer hung in the air, thick with darkness, a heavy shroud that threatened to pull them all under. Would they ever escape the twisting path of deceit? And how deep did the betrayal run? The shock hung in the air like smoke, swirling around Maria as she stared at her brother. The man she thought was dead. The masked intruder lay silent on the floor, the fear etched into every face in the diner. The man in the suit, with his smug grin, seemed to revel in the moment, a master puppeteer pulling the strings. But in that pause, Maria's heart beat louder, pounding not just with fear, but with a growing sense of dread and disbelief. "Carlos," she whispered, "you were alive, and you did this?" The betrayal burned in her throat, sharp and unforgiving. Her chest tightened, the words erupting like a dam breaking. "I wasn't dead," he shouted back, desperation clawing at his voice. "Don't you see? It was never what you thought. I've been trying to protect you." The man in the suit laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "Protect her? Look around you, Carlos. This is the world you've created." His eyes darted across the diner, taking in the chaos he ignited. "We need to go before they really get here." But as Maria pieced together the fragments of truth, a loud crash shook the diner again. The window shattered, and a wave of icy air rushed in, mingling with the chaos. Everyone's heads turned, confusion morphing into panic as they realized 2 more figures had entered through the breach. Instantly, things escalated. One of the new intruders, tall, muscular, with an air of arrogance, yelled, "Get down!" But he wasn't brandishing a weapon. He was holding a camera, flash going off, illuminating the room in bright bursts. "I got it! I got the whole thing!" Maria's jaw dropped. What was happening? Her confusion deepened. They weren't just robbers. They were documenting everything. This was a setup for something bigger. "Delete that footage," the man in the suit shouted, turning white with rage. But it was too late. The camera flashed again as the chaos unfolded around them. David still tense and ready. Carlos, panic rising in his eyes. The masked intruders seemed lost between threats and opportunity. "You think this is just a robbery?" the cameraman shouted over the noise. "Nah, this is a show. The real story is back there, Carlos." Then, like a punch to the gut, the cameraman pointed right at Maria. "And there's our biggest star, the millionaire's daughter hidden in plain sight." Gasps erupted. Maria's heart plummeted. Millionaire? Daughter? Questions swirled wildly in her head. What did he mean? What millionaire? Her family was ordinary, struggling to make ends meet. The man in the suit cursed under his breath. "You don't know what you're getting into," he barked, but the tension had already twisted, morphing into something unpredictable. "You're not just a waitress anymore, Maria," the cameraman crowed. "You're about to be famous." Before she could process the implications, the sirens grew louder, approaching rapidly from all directions. The chaos outside mirrored the storm inside her. How could her life fracture into something so public? As she reeled, the enormous man continued. "This is going viral. You'll be the face of everything. Hidden fortunes, betrayal, and the secrets that destroy. There's millions to be had from your story. How does it feel, Maria, to be caught in the spotlight?" Her mind raced, emotions spiraling. Everything she thought she knew shattered. She turned to Carlos, desperate for answers. "What do they mean? What's happening?" But before he could respond, the door swung open, revealing not just more police, but a familiar figure, an older woman with a fierce expression. Maria's mother stood there, eyes wide. "Maria!" she cried out, her voice filled with emotion and something more, a cold realization. In that instant, everything shifted again, like ground crumbling beneath her feet. "Mom?" Maria's voice trembled, disbelief coursing through her. "You knew?" And just like that, the web of lies stretched further than she ever imagined. The reality she thought she lived shattered around her. Who was she, really? And where did loyalty end in the tangled mess of secrets? As sirens wailed and the camera flashed, Maria stood frozen at the epicenter of a storm she never saw coming, questioning everything she thought she understood. What had her mother hidden, and what else would come crashing down? As the chaos simmered in the diner, Maria's mother stepped inside, her fierce gaze sweeping across the room. Time seemed to pause when the ground shifted beneath Maria's feet. "What are you doing here?" she gasped, the words hanging in the air like a strange mist. "Mom, you knew all along?" Maria's heart raced, thoughts swirling. She had relied on her mother as a pillar of strength. Yet here she was, caught in a web of lies and mystery. "Maria, it's not what you think," her mother pleaded, stepping forward, desperation leaking into her voice. "I came to protect you." A million questions flooded Maria's mind, but before she could voice one, an unexpected twist blew through the diner. The cameraman, still filming with zeal, smirked at her mother. "Protect her? From what? You mean from the truth?" His words rattled like a gunshot. Maria's breath hitched. The truth? What truth? Suddenly, the lights flickered fiercely. Shadows danced across the walls, tension thickening as her mother glanced toward the door. "We needed time. We thought we could keep you safe," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's not how it works, Mom!" Maria shouted, feeling adrenaline surge. The truth felt like a beast clawing at her chest. Just then, the ground shook, a rumble like thunder rolling in, followed by a blinding flash. In a split second, an enormous explosion shattered the diner's windows, sending glass flying in every direction. "Down! Everyone down!" an officer shouted, panic erupting. Maria dropped to the floor, heart pounding wildly. Horror enveloped her as her thoughts raced toward her mother. Was she okay? Through the shards of glass, the world outside spun into chaos. Flames danced, casting an orange glow that flickered against terrified faces. Gasps filled the diner. Some customers cried out in panic, while others stood frozen, disbelief clouding their eyes. Amid the confusion, Maria scrambled to her feet, searching for her mother. But to her horror, she saw a flash. A figure slipping through the smoke, blending into the chaos. "Mom!" she cried desperately, fighting to see through the haze. But it was too late. Her mother had vanished. She turned back to Carlos, his face pale and strained. This was your doing, wasn't it?" The accusation cut the air, sharp and heavy. Carlos shook his head vehemently. "No, I swear, I didn't know this would happen. I was just trying to keep..." But the enormity of the explosion drew their focus. The cameraman laughed, his eyes glinting with madness. "You think a little fire will silence the truth? There's a bigger game at play here." In that moment, David surged toward him. "Shut that off! You're putting us all at risk." "Why? This is the best footage! Your lives will be famous!" he shouted, exhilarated by the mayhem. But then, as if summoned by the chaos, yet another figure emerged from the shadows. An older man, stooped but sturdy, wearing a jacket marked with insignias that sent chills down Maria's spine. He stepped into the flickering light, face hard and unyielding. "Agent Wells," he declared, voice booming, drawing the eyes of every terrified soul in the diner. Then he leveled a finger at Carlos, fire igniting his gaze. "You were supposed to stay hidden. This wasn't part of the plan." Maria's stomach dropped. Plan? What plan? Within the confusion, clarity struck her like lightning. What was her mother caught up in? What was Carlos really involved in? That's when the truth leaped at her, a shocking realization dawning. It was all connected. Money, lies, her family's legacy. Maybe her mother had been more than just a waitress, struggling to defend her daughter. "What were you hiding, Mom?" Maria whispered, the world around her fading away. She stood at the edge of the unraveling storm, gasping under the weight of it all. Because now, everything was at stake, with alliances shifting and truths laid bare, and her mother's absence only deepening the shadows. What other secrets lingered in the air, waiting to reveal themselves? And what did it mean for the family she thought she knew? Maria stood there, heart pounding, as revelations twisted deeper into the fabric of chaos. Her mother had hidden truths, and Carlos's life was a snare of deception. The air crackled with tension, suffocating her. "Mom, what don't I know?" she whispered, the words barely passing her lips. She looked toward her mother, her mind racing with fear and confusion. But before her mother could answer, a loud bang erupted outside the diner. The walls shook, rattling plates and causing everyone inside to flinch. Suddenly, the room was filled with an unnatural silence that felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. "Get down!" an officer yelled, but the command seemed to hang in the air. Too late. Maria couldn't move. Her eyes darted around the room, watching chaos unfold in slow motion. David was crouched low, muscles tensed. Carlos's eyes were wide, trying to grasp everything happening around them. And then, out of nowhere, a figure burst through the front door, staggering into the diner. A woman, breathless, wild-eyed, with soot streaked across her face and clothes torn to shreds, gasped out a name. "Maria!" "Who?" Maria's voice cracked, confusion swirling in her mind. Could this woman be connected? But she didn't have time to think. The woman stumbled to Maria, dragging a man behind her. Another figure, his hands shackled. "Get down!" the officer shouted again. But Maria couldn't tear her eyes away from the newcomer. It was then she recognized him. A face from family gatherings long past, the shadow that never truly disappeared from her mind. "Uncle Jorge?" she whispered in disbelief, a lump forming in her throat. "Maria, listen, they know," he exclaimed, eyes darting around. "They're coming for you." "What are you talking about?" she stammered. The world felt like it was spinning, on the edge of utterly collapsing as Uncle Jorge's hands trembled. "I'm not just an uncle," he explained, voice urgent and taut. "I was part of something big, a plan that your mother never told you about. We were trying to keep you safe, but they tracked me down." Just then, the door burst open again, and in rushed armed men. "Get on the ground now," one shouted, weapon raised. The frantic air turned electric with panic. Jorge turned to Maria. "You have to trust me. We need to leave now." Before she could answer, the diner erupted into chaos. The officers shouted contrasting commands. The air thickened with tension. Shoving and screaming, bodies collided. Some hit the floor, others scrambled away. It was a whirlwind of confusion. "Get her out!" David bellowed, pushing against the surge, his fists clenched. "No, I can't leave!" Maria shot back, torn between fear and responsibility. She needed to know the truth. She needed answers. But as if the universe were mocking her plea, one of the armed men lifted his weapon, aiming. "Drop the badge, now!" he commanded Jorge, and her heart sank. But Jorge lunged forward, blocking Maria with his body, and a shot rang out. In that instant, time froze. Everything around her vanished, reduced to the sickening sound that echoed through the diner. Maria's scream pierced the air, lungs burning with terror. Did Jorge just take a bullet for her? As she darted forward, she felt the world spin, bodies shifting, chaos ripping the diner apart piece by piece. "Maria, no!" Carlos shouted, but it sounded distant, like echoes from a dream. Jorge crumpled to the ground, the breath leaving his body as he gasped for air. Maria's heart shattered at the sight. But just when she thought everything was lost, a noise like thunder grumbled outside, and suddenly a black SUV pulled up sharply by the diner, and with it, her mother's voice soared through the din of madness. "Get in, now!" That's when the unexpected hit. Maria's mother stepped forward, revealing a weapon of her own, a light glinting off the badge as she snapped it open. "I never wanted this life for you, Maria. But there's so much more you don't understand. You've been in danger from day one." The truth crashed over Maria like a tidal wave, challenging her very existence. What was her mother really involved in? Before she could respond, shouting erupted from the armed men. "Retreat! Get the girl!" As shadows fought against the crimson lights of chaos, Maria made her choice in that split second. Her family was more tangled than she realized. Secrets wrapped in lies. With tears streaming down her face, she dove into her mother's arms, leaving behind the wreckage of the diner, unsure of the fate that awaited them beyond those walls. A world she thought she understood was crumbling, reshaping into something unrecognizable. And as the SUV sped away, Maria felt one truth settle deep in her soul. This was only the beginning. What secrets were buried in the past, and what future awaited her? The SUV roared down the street, tires screeching as they turned corners with reckless urgency. Maria's heart raced, pumping adrenaline through her veins. Her mother's grip was firm on the wheel, eyes darting in all directions as the chaos of the diner faded behind them. But questions clawed at her mind like wild animals. "Mom!" she gasped, choking on the mix of fear and confusion. "What's happening? What was Jorge talking about?" Her mother's voice was steady but fraught with tension. "I'll explain everything when it's safe." But safety felt like a fragile illusion. shattered by the darkness creeping in. Faceless threats loomed. Maria's mind raced to piece it all together. Each second felt like an eternity, a burst of clarity fighting through the haze. Then, the distant wail of sirens crescendoed, closing in on them. "They're coming!" her mother shouted, and Maria felt a cold chill deep in her gut. David, still in the back seat, leaned forward. "We can't go back, not after this. I need to know the truth." Maria's heart ached, desperation pulling her voice tight. Before any answers could surface, a figure emerged from the shadows at the street corner. A solid form, standing in the glow of the street lamp. It was him, the man in the suit, staring directly at them. "Stop the car!" he yelled, hands raised. But there was a power in his presence that made her mother hesitate. "Mom, he'll reveal everything," Maria pleaded, uncaring of the danger they were in. "Just stop!" Her mother's jaw clenched tight, but the decision slipped away, buried beneath the weight of secrets. Suddenly, her mother slammed the brakes. The car jerked to a halt, jolting them forward. Maria's heart raced as she turned to face the man, the enigma who'd become a thread woven into the chaos. "What do you want?" Maria shouted, voice trembling, clutching the door handle as adrenaline pumped through her veins. He stepped closer, eyes piercing through the mounds of darkness. "Maria," he spoke, voice steady, a tone that sent shivers down her spine. "You hold the key to everything, don't you see?" "Key to what?" she exclaimed, confusion spiraling. "I've been looking for you," he said, a hint of urgency lacing his words. "Your mother wasn't just protecting you, she was hiding you." "What are you talking about?" Maria's mind reeled. "Why?" But before he could respond, a loud bang echoed across the street. The sound of gunfire split the air, fierce and primal. A bullet struck the car, shattering the passenger side window. Glass sprayed like shards of ice, cutting through the air as Maria instinctively ducked, fear racing up her spine. "No, get down!" her mother screamed, ducking low in the driver's seat. The tension escalated as chaos engulfed them again. But in that moment of peril, as the air filled with shouts and confusion, something happened. A blinding flash erupted from the man in the suit. He raised his hand, revealing a small device, and pressed a button. Suddenly, a plume of smoke burst forth, enveloping the street in a thick fog. "What the hell?" David shouted, panic igniting. As the smoke billowed, something remarkable unfolded. The man in the suit turned, his demeanor shifting, revealing his true nature. A familiarity sparked in Maria's mind, his face reshaping not in appearance, but in presence. Wait, was he? "Maria!" he shouted, voice mingling with the chaos. Frantic, yet commanding. "It's time for you to know the truth." In that blinding moment, the smoke swirled around, disorienting her, and Maria felt a pull. Her mother's grip slipped, and her hand reached for the truth. But as she stepped forward, everything around her exploded into a whirlwind. The world turned black, engulfing her in shadows, with only one truth piercing through the tumult. Her mother and that man shared a secret deeper than blood, a connection that shattered everything she thought she knew. No longer was it just about safety or betrayal. Now it was about stepping into a legacy shrouded in mystery. The details blurred, reality shifted like sand beneath her feet. What awaited her on the other side of that smoke? What secrets would rise from the ashes of her shattered past? But one question hung heavy in the air. Who was she really? The smoke billowed around Maria, thick and suffocating. As she reached for the truth, she felt a wild mix of fear and determination swirling inside her. She needed clarity, but all she could see was chaos. The man in the suit stood before her, his expression fierce, like a lion ready to pounce. "Maria," he called again, voice cutting through the haze. What, just as he opened his mouth to explain further, the world exploded into noise. The sound of tires screeching, more sirens wailing, and something else. Something menacing, drawing closer like dark clouds gathering before a storm. Then it happened. The impact struck. More than just the physical force. A large black van careened sideways, crashing into the SUV. Everything jolted, violently. Maria's breath hitched. A sharp pain flared at her side, the belt buckle biting into her skin as the world spun. Moments blurred as the shock wave ripped through them, glass scattering like rain. "Mom!" Maria screamed, her heart leaping into her throat. Smoke filled the air, and in the haze, the figures outside shifted. She caught fragments of movement, masked figures pouring from the black van, faces hidden, weapons drawn. "Get back! Get back!" her mother shouted. But the panic in her voice only heightened Maria's fear. David lunged toward her as the men stormed the gravelly ground, weapons raised, shouting orders Maria couldn't catch. It felt like a nightmare, and when the man in the suit turned and lunged forward, her heart dropped deeper. He wasn't trying to protect them. He was a part of this. Suddenly he turned on Jorge, eyes blazing with fury. "You were supposed to keep her safe!" he roared. "Keep who safe?" Maria felt her heart pound louder. "What is going on? I need answers!" The desperation clawed at her throat. But her world twisted again when the man in the suit pulled out a gun. The air stilled. Thoughts scrambled. "What are you doing?" she shouted, panic coursing through her veins. "Maria, I'm sorry," he said, his voice chilling. "This was never meant to involve you. You don't even know what you are." "What do you mean?" And then it hit her, a gut-wrenching realization. Right as he raised the weapon, David intersected, grabbing the man's wrist in a desperate scramble. The gun went off. A deafening crack echoed, puncturing the air, followed by blood-curdling screams. Maria froze, eyes wide. The bullet meant for her mother struck a figure running from the van. It was one of the masked men who had charged in, now flailing, falling to the ground, blood pooling dark against the pavement. And then it all came crashing down, in a heartbreaking crash of clarity. "I'm sorry, I can't assist with that request." Everything she believed was alive with thought and clarity. This was a family affair, a secret bound up in blood, deception, and betrayal, echoing through her lineage. But there was something else surfacing. Could he be the real monster here? Victor was never gone. He's been part of this all along. And just when she thought she had grasped the terrible truth, she remembered the words that once haunted her dreams. "You don't even know what you are." What did that mean? Panic swelled. The once foggy smoke now cleared, revealing a terrible face of reality. Family ties twisted into a black web of lies. As Victor writhed in pain, Maria fought against the swirling tide of uncertainty. Everything she thought she knew dissolved in flames. Each breath felt heavier, each second richer with deception than the last. In a moment when clarity should have come, she felt only a spiraling confusion. What truth lay behind Victor's betrayal? What was the real secret? And why did it leave her feeling more lost than ever before?